webinar. The format of this is basically me talking and showing you guys a little bit of netTerrain, our software, and how it relates to AWS. So I've been this AWS connector, which is part of our collector software tool. In fact, if you go up to utilities and netTerrain, you can download the collector if you're on version 8.6. We added that. Some of you may not be familiar or have netTerrain or even seen it, so I won't assume that you do. But let me back up, talk about AWS a little bit, and what I'm going to be talking about, which my focus is really AWS with respect to like EC2 instances. Things like elastic IPs, images. If you look on the right hand side, I'm sort of scrolling down my catalog of AWS stuff. Gateways, NAT gateways, ACLs, interfaces, security groups, snapshots, subnets, volumes, and AWS VPCs, although there's a few other things we gather as well from AWS. And you know, why, what I'm talking about, why does this exist? This connector, this and our Azure, because we have an Azure connector as well, sort of exists partly because I wanted them to exist. Our customers too, to a certain extent, but we use AWS pretty extensively in our infrastructure, and Azure and some other tools similar to that. And I wanted a better way to sort of manage and track the information that were in these systems. So this partly got built out of, you know, I guess me whining at engineering, if you want to put it that way. And certainly partly we also had some customers who were interested. So, so that's partly why it exists, but what exists and what can you do with it? And, you know, then you can decide if it makes sense for what you're trying to do. And certainly love to hear from you, by the way, if you are doing AWS and there's something specific you're looking to do or looking for with respect to AWS. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about is, you know, using data you collect and how you might use it. And well, it's more like how I kind of use it. This is sort of about me. But how you might also use it too with respect to your infrastructure. So I should stop too. I didn't really introduce myself. I'm Jason Sherman. I'm a sales engineer here. I do a lot of pre and post sales work with customers, and also I help with our EC2 infrastructure. So that's why I have a interest in it. And it's interesting stuff, right? I mean, cloud stuff is here to stay, and it keeps getting bigger, it seems like, and more people want to use it or are using it, whether they want to or not. And there's a lot of options out there. You know, you certainly have Google and lots of companies that are not AWS or Microsoft and so on that provide these cloud services. So this is where we're just kind of focused because this is what we use. But again, you know, adding these tools is not really that big a deal. But before I move forward, I'm not doing PowerPoint. I'm actually in netTerrain, our software right now. We're a network documentation tool. Some of you might have seen it. Some of you might have it. So I'll be kind of working inside of this and inside our collector and showing you that. Before I move forward, though, I'm going to click on a poll here just to see if you guys are AWS users. I'm going to launch this, and you know, if you're using AWS, specifically EC2 instance type stuff, what quantities do you have? Are you guys sort of more of a small on the small side, 0 to 10, 100 plus, somewhere in between? So if you don't mind answering that question, that'd be great. And some of you might be 0. Maybe you're not doing anything with AWS, which is fine as well. But if you guys hopefully see the polling, throw some stuff out there. I'm in the more 11 to 50 bracket myself right now. It seems to always keep growing though. See some of you guys, a lot of you are in the 51 to 100. It's good stuff. So But for me, I'll show you some screenshots, and you guys, if you're AWS users, of course, you'd be familiar with some of these things I'm going to show you to a certain extent. Because not, and I've got two environments now from the standpoint of, of the dev area. And of course, we have production as well. So thanks for doing that polling, by the way. So the majority of you guys were in the 50 to the 100, and I had a few with 0 to 10. Nobody above 100, it looks like. But so if I drill down into my images, I was taking some screenshot earlier. I'm sorry that this seems, it goes a little slow. This screen sharing software kills my computer sometimes, performance-wise. But anyway, so AWS, what I found over time of using AWS is, one, there's a million tools in AWS, right? Now, for me, I'm always focused on really the EC2 side of the house, setting up a server, managing the server security, things like that, stuff you see here, right? Snapshots and key pairs and IP, elastic IPs and so on. And, they give you this interface, which is great. And I really like using this instances and going down and clicking on things and seeing things. But what I was always lacking, and so that was one sort of area. I'll go to the other page, So you got things like network security and load balancing and scaling and so on, right? And you have all these different regions. You can set up servers anywhere in the world pretty much now. It's amazing. It's fantastic. And I do it. I've got servers in different parts of the world, and not just AWS, but Azure and so on. And it's great. It's very easy to set up and do. But what I was always missing was sort of a relationship between, things like my backups, my volumes, and my snapshots. And I like to just kind of see that in a view, sort of a documented view of information and data, right? So we built, before this, I was using what we call our integration toolkit. We would pull data from Amazon using their APIs and different connections. And then there was just a lot of extra pieces kind of involved. It was a little time consuming to sort of document that. So this time around, I'll talk about the collector and connector in a second. So if you look at this, you're like, wow, what's that big crazy mess? You're showing me this. This is what you want to tell me. This is really my AWS infrastructure, at least part of it. And it shows you relationships between things. Like if you look at this and you go, these are all the gateways, these are all the ACLs, network interfaces, and so on. You see all those things and how they're related to each other, at least how I define them as the relationships. I mean, this is all really pretty much predefined after spending some time going through and understanding, hopefully, what is the correct relationship between these things. So if you look at sort of a segment, it's almost a region for me, pretty much. A lot of this is like local type stuff, and some of these are more in different regions or areas. But you get really kind of the whole sort of picture as a whole. Now, this is okay, but what I'm really striving for is kind of two things. One is I want the data that I'm getting out of something like this AWS, connector. I want to be able to understand what I'm looking at, the relationships, but also does it tell me something, for instance, security groups that are not in use. I can look at a drawing and go, you know what, I've got tons of security groups that get created that I end up not using. I just want to delete them. Now, they're not costing me money or anything, but what they cost me is the fact that I may see them in a list of things that are in production or dev that I really care about. And then I've got groups that aren't in use and I don't want to see them. It's just noise to me is what it is. So a lot of this is just part of it's eliminating noise. Part of it's being efficient. Part of it is hopefully saving some money too. Some of these things do cost me money. Things like volumes with no snapshots or AMIs, snapshots not associated with an AMI. So I may have snapshots or something out there that I can't really use anymore or I don't need. So I just want to get rid of them because they are storage space and they're costing me something. There's a lot. No, it's probably not a lot of money, but same with like elastic IPs. I get rid of those if I'm not really using them. And if I'm going to reuse them, that's fine. But those will cost you money. Not a lot, of course, but what I really ultimately try to get to is I want to be able to create a view, a diagram of a production environment or a dev environment. So I understand the relationships. I understand the security groups, the servers, the EC2 instances, the volumes, are there snapshots, are there images, and so on, and see that in one view. And what's more important is getting the data on a regular and updated basis, and I'm not touching it, right? So when I click on an image, I can see the image. You're not going to see it here, but I can see the information about the image, but also I know that the image exists, and I know that it's associated with a snapshot and a volume and so on. And I understand the security group, and I can click on it and actually see the rules for the group if I want to. Of course, I can always go to my AWS and log in and see it there if you have access to it, right? So it just helps me better understand the environments that I have set up in AWS and how they work together. So for me, ultimately, my goal is to get into sort of production type views. And in my environment, in my documentation, I hang other things off of here: users, passwords, anything I need about the environment to get into it and manage it and so on. Because that's what we do with our netTerrain. We use our software, and I use it to help me be more efficient with us managing our infrastructure, right? So, how do we get all this data, create drawings and diagrams and so on? A lot of this is all pre-created, the connections and so on. It's all built from the Amazon data, or the AWS data, I should say, not Amazon. But basically what you're doing is you're going into our connector, and you're putting in information, and you're pressing a button, and that's it. It's creates a bunch of stuff, pushes it into the netTerrain so you can visualize it, and then you can, do what you want with the data. Build, you might want to build something like I've done over here, or maybe you're just trying to get a view overall of what you have and what's out there and so on. So it's kind of nice. But so what does this look like? What's that sort of process look like? That's not it. I need this guy here. Okay. So let me go over to my connectors. So here, this is our netTerrain collector. And the netTerrain collector is a collection of what we call connectors, connector. And a connector for us is a means of getting data from something, from a system usually. That something is usually one of two things: discovery, like SNMP or Nmap, or ping. We'll put in information into the system, IP addresses, and go out and figure out my network as best you can, right? So, do those types of things. Or Nmap, maybe you're not using SNMP, you just want to go out and scan ports and try and understand your network, or that kind of thing, or just basic ping type stuff, WMI, discovery. On the other side of that is connecting to systems: AWS, Azure, ServiceNow, SolarWinds, Spectrum, etc. These are using those systems interfaces, usually APIs. In fact, I think all of these are APIs except for the ones doing discovery type stuff, where you configure what you want to connect to. So Azure, here's all connection information for Azure. AWS, connection information. So with our tool, you can go in and actually you can choose a specific region you want to connect to, or you could do something like I want to connect to just scan every region. So it depends on the user, of course, you set up for this. I have a read-only type user that has access to all the regions to do the reads and stuff, right? So you can go in and set it up and configure that. And some places I don't have AWS instances, like in Asia Pac. I don't have any instances. That's not true. I do have, I think, some in Sydney. But if I don't have a presence there, just skips it and says, puts something in the log and says, hey, you don't have anything there, basically. So you fill in the information. You can test the connection, of course, and then you press the button called scan, and then it goes out and scans the environment, and then it discovers information. So in my case, this is all the stuff that it's discovering, right? I'm not going to get into, showing all the details of my stuff, but this is where you'd go in, but you can see the quantities, elastic IPs and images and so on. Before I started this, some of these were a lot higher, elastic IPs, images, etc. I went and killed a lot of stuff because of what I discovered. I wasn't keeping too well track of it. Now, you don't have to, of course, get all these things. You don't even have to discover all of these. You can open the settings for this. I think it's in advanced, and you can choose what you're going to discover. What of this data do you really want? Do you want to even upload it all? You can exclude it. You can say, you know what, I don't care about all the policies and the users and stuff like that. I'm not going to push those through for different reasons. It might be security, it might be you just don't want to get that. And of course, if your account doesn't have access to one of these things, it's not going to be able to read it anyway. So what happens is you go out and you do this discovery and you find this information, and then you can do stuff with it. And that's basically the stuff I showed you, right? So let me back up here. I'm going to go up a level here. So, what sort of happens when you do this discovery? Well, it pushes data into the netTerrain environment, and it sort of builds a view, and it usually organizes things together. But you can also set up in the XML. You can say, just put everything in one big drawing, and that's actually what I have. And that's that big drawing I showed you before, where it was kind of a mess of stuff. I actually like that view. I like just bringing it all into one, and then I take pieces out and cut it and move it and that sort of thing. But you can have it organized too. Like here, it's elastics and instances and so on. They're sort of just organized together. So if I go in and look at instances, then I would see instance information. Some of these are just connections, so you see information in here you normally wouldn't. They would be hidden as reference objects. That doesn't really matter. But the point is, you bring this data in, and then from there, I get back to my original, all about me, which is creating a diagram or view of information and data. Being able to see things like a volume and what it's associated with, and there's all kinds of, just information about this. What's the snapshot? What's the instance? What's the, etc. So that's again gives you it, and again, this was, this part wasn't automatic. I put it into this specific diagram, but all the connections, the discovery of all the instance information and so on, that was all, just discovered, created, and brought in. The data you see here on the left, again, this is very sort of EC2 centric, I'll call it that. AWS and all these other, certainly cloud companies, seem to give hooks, APIs really into anything, any data pretty much that they offer. So just because I don't have it here doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means nobody's asked me for it. Nobody said, hey, I want to do X that's in AWS. Can you bring that data in, and can we do something with that? Because I want to add it to a drawing or diagram and so on. So it's not that you can't, but so that's what I wanted to cover today. Couple things to note. If you want to try this out, you can go to netTerrain Cloud. You can sign up for a trial account. You can download the collector. That's this button here, collector, and install it. Put in your EC2, push data back, into your cloud instance, and you'd see what it looks like. It may not bring in these icons specifically. They may be just green dots. I sort of cleaned mine up with the icons they had, but you may just get, information more just sort of generic looking objects, but those can be cleaned up and changed. I think the important part is, seeing kind of how it works for you and your environment, if that's what you're looking to do. So you can go out there and try that. If you're a customer already, get upgraded to 8.6, which is out now in the last couple of weeks, and get the latest collector, and you can give it a try if you're looking to do AWS or, again, Azure and something else. So if you have questions, more detailed questions about all this, or if there's some other system you want to connect to, maybe you're using Google Cloud, or maybe it's Oracle or somebody else, and you really, you're trying to do something there, let us know. We can certainly talk to you about adding a connector into our collector we'd have to do some look into it a bit before we could do it, but we could certainly talk with you about it and see. Before anybody goes, I have one more, I think, poll to do here. Let me launch it. I'm just curious if you guys are doing AWS stuff. Are you documenting it at all? And no is a perfectly good answer. Are you using Visio for it, Excel, or maybe something else? Because yeah, just curious to see if it's what's out there and if it's important to do documentation. So most people know, and it may not be. You know, a lot of people are like, you know, what Amazon gives you might be enough, and because it is pretty good. I just find that not having visual of those relationships is a little tough sometimes. So looks like the majority of people are no. So looks like not a lot of documentation going on out there, which is great. So I'll leave you at, if you have questions, please reach out. You say you want to try something, let us know, or just sign up, netTerrain.com for an instance. If you have troubles, let us know. You know, so you run into a roadblock or something, we can help you out there. And you know, again, if you find something else that you're looking to do with in AWS, or love to hear from you. So thanks everybody for coming, and look forward to hopefully hearing from you, and happy cloud computing.